CC, my man, about a year ago, we were having some cocktails and hanging on the beach and chilling with some local Charleston pharmacists down there, man. It's awesome to see you and awesome catching up a little bit this morning.
You too, Carlos. It's great to see you, man.
You too, bro. Man, you are a very impressive marketing lead gen rainmaker in the space here. Very impressive. We did a podcast 2 years ago where it was primarily focused on text messaging and text message marketing KPIs.
hmm
And I think that you have a lot of valuable information, insight, and philosophy on what you've done with your business, how you have intentionality around it of being a lifestyle based business now, which is awesome to hear and catch up on, hitting the Dominican Republic and things like that. Um,
Yes,
so I think there's a lot of good stuff that you can talk about just going through the progression of a business in multiple markets where you're managing the lead gen and marketing that's primarily text message based to now transitioning to 100% cold calling or almost all cold calling,
yep,
doing coaching. So you have a lot of insight all over the country and would like to focus on those two things, kind of best insight and an explanation of your philosophy around cold calling 100%, and then also how you've been able to build, which is super, super impressive, this lifestyle based business where you're not in the minutia and not doing those low dollar per hour tasks day in and day
absolutely.
out.
Yeah, first off, Carlos, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be back on board here with you, and hopefully, I can provide some value to the listeners here. So we'll jump straight into it. But yeah, man, last time we spoke, I was doing a lot of text message marketing. That was pretty much my bread and butter. I noticed over probably 2019 going into mid 2020 that it was taking more and more text messages to actually get leads in. So when that happens, you need more lists, and lists cost money because you have to skip trace them. So I realized that wasn't really sustainable. And pretty much when I would text message my list, they'd be one and done. So I'd like text message them. And if I messaged them again, probably the next month or so, or maybe even the next couple of weeks, I just would not get the same type of response. So far as scaling, text message marketing is very difficult to do. When you're first starting out, you're trying to get your first deal. Absolutely. I would suggest that for anybody starting out, just because the barrier to entry is so low. But for me right now, I'm more concerned about scaling and not being too hands-on in my business on a day-to-day basis. So cold calling is the one thing I found that just produces replicable results day in and day out without me having to really manage it that much because you can outsource this to other companies. I actually started building out my own cold calling team now. So I have a little bit more control over the lead flow and the scripts and what they're saying on the phone. So yeah, man, cold calling is what I'm doing right now. Moved away from text messaging. And yeah, the business is pretty much outsourced. I probably focus on my wholesale company 1 to 2 hours a day. I'm wholesaling right now in Houston. And then I probably focus on client campaigns maybe 3 to 4 hours out of the day. So really focus more on lifestyle, traveling the world and things of that nature, scaling things back a little bit and focusing on my mindset, my mental, and just enjoying myself, man, now that I'm in my 30s.
Amazing, man. Always good to prioritize your mental and enjoying yourself. Do you want to give a quick snapshot of what your company looks like as far as team members and how many cold callers you have? And then we'll kind of back up and talk about how you got to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Carlos. So I have two separate business models that I'm doing right now. Both are focused on lead generation. So I have my wholesaling company. I'm partnered with my old business partner, Ethan, out in Houston. So he's the boots on the ground slash acquisitions manager. He manages the team out there. And my percentage in the partnership is 50%. And I basically just run the marketing. So that's really what I enjoy doing and really how I feel like I've gotten to this point where I have a lifestyle based business just because I focused really intently on what I like doing. And then when I have to, roll up my sleeves and, put the gloves on and do some work, it's not, it doesn't feel like work because I enjoy doing it. And I really
Mm-hmm.
encourage anybody that's in this industry. I mean, there's so many different paths you can take in real estate. Focus on one and then outsource the rest because you're not going to be good at everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that I was sitting here trying to talk to sellers, cold call, lock up properties and things of that nature. And it always seemed like it was just a struggle to do that. And the marketing just comes naturally to me. And it's one of those things that I noticed that a lot of investors struggle with. So in addition to me wholesaling specifically in Houston now, I also pretty much do the same thing in other people's companies where they just pay me a fee and I'll just monitor their marketing for them. So they can focus on just going out to appointments, crushing the appointments, and either flipping their properties, locking them up and turning them into rentals, or wholesaling them. So I sort of just take all that stress and confusion off of their back and just put it on me and say, hey, I'll just manage this. I'll set up the systems and I'll just set up the appointment for you. And you guys can go out there and go to the appointments. So all my business models are pretty much underneath the lead generation umbrella, which is why I'm able to have that sort of focus and clarity and free time, because I'm pretty much doing the same thing across all the board. I'm not trying to do cold calling. I'm not trying to do acquisitions or dispositions. It's just focused specifically on lead generation.
Love it. And before we get into how, best insight your philosophy around this and how to get this set up and, kind of extracting the best possible information from you, from those who are either cold calling or have aspirations to, what's kind of your general sense of real estate investing, or more so the market right now, what you're seeing, just because you have that insight of Houston and different areas where you're monitoring lead generation marketing for different people across the country?
Yeah, great question. So it's awesome that I have that insight because I'm running campaigns literally in every active like wholesaling market I have my hands in probably right now. Either I'm wholesaling myself or I'm helping somebody out in their business. So I understand what areas to watch out for and which ones are good to go. Like for instance, Houston, back when Hurricane Harvey hit, that was an excellent market because people needed to wholesale their houses or sell their houses for cheap or cash, or they wanted to move out of Houston. It's always been a solid market, but recently when I looked at the data, the housing prices are getting back to pre-Harvey levels. So when I look at that, I say, okay, maybe my marketing dollars shouldn't be spent here and I can focus somewhere else. So I'm constantly looking at the data and finding where can my marketing dollars go the furthest, because as wholesalers, especially once you understand virtual wholesaling, you go anywhere in the United States, right? And not really be concerned about, okay, having an actual team build up, because it's too easy right now to find buyers. So I focus on where those active markets are and how I could keep my marketing costs low, my cost per lead low, and my cost per deal low. Yep.
Love that. And do you want to share, and this may be a good time, any like general sense of those different KPIs? And I know that's a little bit of a loaded question because it's across the market, but could you speak to that at any level as far as cost per deal, cost per lead, any metrics like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some notes prepared for us. And it's interesting because across all my markets, and the main KPI I'm looking at are calls, like connects with my cold callers to leads. Like how many connects is it taking to get one lead? Because if I could do that, I could reverse engineer and determine it's taking X amount of leads to get a contract. And so I just could look at that and say, okay, I need X amount of, I want 2 or 3 deals this month. I need X amount of cold calls in order to do that. So that's another reason why I like cold calling, because it's very scalable. And once you have your numbers dialed in, there's no guesswork in it. There's a lot of other marketing channels that perform well, but a lot of it's guesswork, like PPC. I know a lot of people do that, but man, I just love cold calling because it seems like the numbers just stay consistent. So yeah. So to answer your question here, the main KPI I'm looking at are calls to lead. So if I'm at like a 0.4% motivated seller response rate or appointment rate, meaning like if I'm calling 20,000 people, like if my cold callers connected to 20,000 people, 80 of those will be actual leads. And that's across the board with some variation. In Indianapolis, it's at 0.5%. And in Baltimore, it's like 0.3%, but it's around 0.4%, meaning like if I have 20,000 connections, 0.4% of those are going to actually be leads.
Okay. And that's very scalable. And this probably goes into, we'll finish touching on any other KPIs on the notes there that you want to share, but that would probably transition well into start outsourcing or bringing on cold callers to your team, because I imagine scalability wise, you love the consistency of it. For you, it sounds like it starts with reverse engineering, whatever you're trying to accomplish and then probably just hiring or outsourcing, however you want to go about it, those numbers that you need to make the calls. So it's like there's a certain threshold where you just need to keep bringing on callers. I know that you've had a ton at some point, probably still do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, at one point I was managing, I think, like 50 cold callers. That was
Yeah.
stressful. I got a lot of gray hairs out of that. So right now I'm probably at anywhere from 10 to 20 per week. They're constantly coming and going. Cold call retention. I mean, if you keep a cold caller on for more than 3 months, that's amazing. Most of them get burnt out pretty quickly because it's demanding. And if they're not generating leads every week, you got to cut them. So not everybody is cut out for this job. So one thing that I do to go back to the organizational chart and how my system and business is set up is I have supervisors that supervise my, I guess, my subordinate employees. So I never want to have a situation where I have a cold caller or somebody that's being paid like $4 an hour coming straight to me, because number one, that individual, if I have to like train them, I'm going to have to train each and every one over and over again. So this is how I treat my whole company is I have people that I train up top, and then they're required to train the people and recruit underneath them. So I train one individual once, and then they train people underneath them. So I never have to like jump in and just drop everything and train everybody again. Like I've done that over and over again. And I found that they like that because that gives them accountability. And when you start making people, supervisors and telling them, hey, you're a supervisor or you're a trainer, they start owning the position a little bit more. And then they self-police themselves as well. So they'll let me know if somebody isn't performing well. And they're like, hey, we need to get rid of this guy or girl because it's making the whole team look bad. So that's sort of my philosophy with training team members on, and really has provided me or given me a lot of time back. And I don't have to worry about whether or not the system is running well because I train my rock stars first, and then they take responsibility with training and recruiting people underneath them.
So at this point for you, with having that structure set up and kind of the different lines of the family or operation organization, there is a lot of turnover for your cold callers, and you're managing, I think you said anywhere from 10 to 20 at a time currently, but that's not part of the 1 or 2 hours a day that you work right now.
No, literally, Carlos, the only thing I'm doing is just monitoring KPIs. So I have a data box dashboard and another Excel spreadsheet that my project manager updates. And literally at the end of the day, and in the middle of the day, I'll look and see where my campaigns are performing. So if I have 5 cold callers in a market and it's like 1:00 p.m. and I only have 2 leads generated, I'm going to say, hey, let's pause everything and let's see what's going on here. Because if I only generated 2 leads, I'm supposed to be at 10 leads by that point in the daytime. I know there's something up with the dialer or the list, or there's something going on. So during the day, I try to be on it, because you can have a lot of wasted time if they're cold calling a bad list, or say they're calling phone numbers and their DIDs are spam. So I jump in midday and then at the end of the day to review my metrics, and that's about it. And if my metrics are off, I'll tell my project manager what needs to be fixed, and she'll usually fix it because she's amazing.
Love that.
Yeah, man.
Love that. So what do you think would be a good path to take this down? I think we could still hit on a few KPIs or whatever notes that you have there that you think would be shared. But you're at a very top tier level, and we can kind of talk about a few things of how you got there. We're going through kind of the structure of how you have systems and processes already set up to do all the hiring and managing the cold caller, stuff like that. What kind of stuff do you think would be most helpful for someone listening to this call that has cold calling aspirations or is looking to improve their game?
Yeah. And I apologize if I'm talking at too high a level, because
no, you're good, dude. You are good. It's like there's so much stuff. I've even been thinking, because I have a stop at the top of the hour here. We may need to break this up, maybe record some of it later this week or early next week, just because there's so much stuff that you could give on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So most people, Carlos, I've noticed, are at that point where they've closed a couple of deals, but they are just not getting that type of consistency day in and day out. And so, they close a couple assignments, pretty big assignments, and they're like, hey, I need to put money back in marketing, but they don't really know what to do at that point. And I think a lot of people try to do the whole solopreneur thing and try to do all that themselves. And I say the first thing, if you're going to outsource and you're going to look to scale up, you got to get some quality cold callers. And the best way to do that is use other companies that have done this before, right? So things have changed so much since I started investing. Back in 2015, not too long ago, but still, there weren't cold call companies like there are right now that understand, what your KPI should be, understand when your list isn't performing well. So you don't have to figure all this stuff out. I'm huge on using vendors that are experts in their field and then, just plugging myself into their system. So that's my philosophy. If you're going to do anything, guys, starting out, try to find a company that's done this before and knows exactly what they're doing, because at that point, you're not figuring out yourself, and you could get caught up just trying to figure that out when somebody is way ahead of you in that regard. And I wish I would have done that sooner, like leaned on like other companies and stuff to get my marketing going, because I literally will overanalyze and overthink, my metrics and whether or not I'm doing the right thing or targeting the right list.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Any recommendations that you have on that front?
Yeah. There's a couple. So there's this one company I use called AM Virtual Sourcing. They're in the Philippines. They do a great job. Lead Mining Pros, Nick Nicholas's company, do a great job. I've actually had a lot of people hit me up over Facebook too. And I actually just started using a company because I'm always testing talent out and stuff. So if you guys are on Facebook, you probably have gotten friend requests from virtual assistants and stuff. And hey, don't knock them until you try them. So
yeah,
I'm always testing that out. Yep. And seeing who works best.
Love that, man. So how often are you kind of going? I know that you're reviewing this stuff daily, and you're kind of like the puppet master, so to say, kind of just pulling some strings and looking at the business from a high level. What type of thing or what type of rhythm do you have to analyzing KPIs, or analyzing potentially looking into a new market if the KPIs aren't as efficient for you, or are performing as well as possible for you?
Yeah. So if I'm going in a new market, and perfect example, I went into Austin. It was Austin, Texas, a couple months ago, and that market's always been sort of competitive as far as wholesaling. And so I was marketing there, and I noticed my KPIs, my lead flow per day was not as high as it was for my other markets. So I always tell people, just give it at least a month. If you start fiddling with stuff like too soon, then you don't know whether or not what your average is going to be over the course of a month. Like, so during the first week, I think we generated like 20 leads. Then the next week we generated like 5, and then 5 the week after. And then it was like 2 the week after. I said, hey, we have to put a break on this. And there's no sense, if you're seeing a decline in your KPIs like that, just calling or marketing however you're marketing without stopping and taking a look at everything. Don't just throw money and hope things fix itself. There's obviously an issue there. So for us, it was just, a little bit too competitive at the time. So we went and we switched and took that client to Houston. So because there were much more properties to choose from there. And we also had a buyer's list that we can market those properties to. So whenever I'm looking at a new market, Carlos, I'm mainly looking at how many properties have sold in the last 30 days. The more properties that sold, that's obviously better, because both rehabbers and retail buyers are going to want to be there. So definitely looking at the properties that have sold, and those zip codes we were targeting in Austin compared to Houston, it was like night and day as far as like the metrics. And obviously we went to Houston and got the client more leads and got them a few contracts. So if you're going to make any changes to your campaigns, I would do them on a monthly basis versus like changing things day by day or week by week. I see a lot of people get frustrated, and it can be frustrating if you're throwing like $200, $300, $400 at cold calling every week and you're seeing a decrease in results. But you have to wait it out and at least wait a month before you start messing with things, because the problem may solve itself over the course of the month.
Cool. And that's a question I get all the time, or see people talking about, is going into different virtual markets and how you're choosing that. So you like keeping it simple just as far as transactions in the last 30 days. What's kind of your philosophy behind the type of lists that you're pulling? Because I know that you've been heavy in the weeds in that before. What's kind of like what you're pulling and your philosophy behind that, and your methodology around it?
Yeah. So I could talk about this for hours. So I won't put you or the audience to sleep. So I'll keep it I'll keep it as entertaining.
The people
as
want to know,
possible.
man. The people want to know. It's about. I hear people talk about it every day, like how to choose a new virtual market to go into and
Mhm.
what type of data to pull and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's twofold. The first thing I'm looking for, Carlos, is I have got to analyze those zip codes. And when I say analyzing them, I mean, I'm actually looking to see, are these going to be the best combination of zips to get a contract in? Will my ideal audience or demographic even be there? And you could tell that based on the data. So one thing I'm doing right now is I have like a master spreadsheet of like 25,000 zips on it, pretty much every zip in the United States. So if I go to a new market, I'll look at the whole market from a county level and I'll say, okay, there's 50 zip codes here. Let me find the average median sale price between all of them. So let's just say the average median sale price in the last 30 days for those houses were $300,000. Well, anything above $300,000 or at $300,000, like any house in those zip codes will probably tell me that those are probably affluent areas we want to stay away from. So off the rip, I'm not even looking at those zip codes, regardless of how much buyer activity there has been. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Yeah. So that's really the first thing I'm looking at. So I'll probably just focus on the zip codes that were for like $250,000 or less. And then I'm looking at home buyer activity. So if there were only one or two houses sold there, if I get a contract in that area, I'm not going to have any buyers because there were only one or two houses sold. So I eliminate any zip code that has like less than 20 houses sold as well. So my whole goal is to eliminate zip codes. So the more I start off with, the better. And then I'm left with these really targeted zips where I know that we have the best chance to get contracts from. And then I layer that with some criteria. I don't go after a particular list. People always ask me that if I'm going after like code violations or tax delinquents. I don't do that. I'm just looking at what wholesale properties are selling for. So let's just say most houses, you're assigning them for $80,000. I'm going to look at any property that sold for $80,000 or less. So my purchase price will be, okay, $80,000 purchase or less, built in 1999 or less. I'll also do total outstanding loans of $80,000 or less because somebody could have bought a house for $80,000 but took out a second mortgage and owed $200,000. So, you don't want to get leads that come through that aren't qualified, and they won't be qualified if you have to buy the house for 80 grand and they owe $200,000. So for me, my process is eliminating, and then having this really targeted list of like 10,000 to 20,000 records that I can target. And then ideally in a month, I'll be able to get a contract out of that. And then when I first started, I did my numbers here. If you put 4 or 5 cold callers on it, that'll be like $3,200 a week. A month. And then data is like $3,000. So you're like $6,200 all in. But my average assignment fee right now is 20 grand. So I would say that's pretty good considering that everything is outsourced pretty much.
And you would calculate that the 6,200 is your cost per deal?
Now, initially. So that's why I look at it at a quarterly basis. And a lot of people get a little shooken up when they see this number because they have to pay for data up front and then they have to pay for cold callers. But investors need to realize that your data can last you for 2 months. Even if you call it for the first month, you could take a break and call that same list again in 2 or 3 months. So if you could pull a 20,000 record list that could last you for 2 months, then your cost per deal will be closer to probably $3,000 because you'll get 2 deals out of that over 2 months. And you paid $3,000 for the data once, and then your cold callers $3,200. It'll be a little bit more than that. So 2 deals for $40K, spending 12, 14 grand. I'll take that any day.
Yeah. Love that. And that's pretty common across the clients that you're working with, and in addition to your own business.
Yeah, exactly. And when people hear this, I don't want them thinking, oh man, I have to spend that much to get a deal. I'm looking at it from a scaling standpoint, right? So if you want to start off, with a smaller budget, you could definitely do that, but it'll be more manual. I'm looking at it from like, hey, day one, if I were to set my business up again back in January 2015, this is how I would do it. And it's built to scale. It's not built to, roll your sleeves up and manually do everything yourself and then put money back in marketing. That's why I did initially. But now I look at my, marketing campaigns more of like, hey, how do we scale it? And so, up front, you're going to have to spend more money, but it averages out over like a quarter once you're following up with the sellers. Sellers are going to come out of nowhere and say, hey, I'm interested in, selling my house if you're putting out offers every day. So, yeah.
Cool. Love it, man.
Yeah.
Where you want to take it from here? I know that you got a bunch of KPIs, notes, data, stuff like that. But I mean, this is all amazing insight and philosophy, just kind of hearing from someone that's super high level and super spread out as far as perspective across the country. So we can take this a number of different ways.
Yeah, I think we should talk now is one thing I'm seeing a lot of people talk about are lead managers, which is really good, right? And so lead managers versus an acquisitions manager. I always get asked, which one people should hire first. And, a lot of people want to hire an acquisitions manager first, but I think investors need to understand that your AM is going to be tackling hot leads. So you need enough leads for them to tackle, right? Your AM isn't going to be motivated to call, if they're an American and you're paying them base plus commission, they're not going to be motivated to call, nor is it the highest and best use of their skill set to call unmotivated leads, right? So I always tell people, hey, get a lead manager first, because that individual is going to be there to actually follow up with your leads. They're just touching base with the seller, because we need to be top of mind. Unless we're sending them mail all day or sending them a text every day, we're not going to know whether or not their situation changes. So life events happen. The mortality rate in the United States right now is 0.8%. So might as well be 1%. So if you have 1,000 sellers, 1% of those either will pass away or possibly have a close loved one pass away in a year, that are some sort of life event that will happen in a year that would trigger them to sell their house. So it's really important to be like top of mind with the seller. And we do that by having a lead manager just follow up. That's not your acquisitions member. That's not their job or responsibility. That's the responsibility of a lead manager, just to touch base and say, hey, we're still buying houses. Has your situation changed since the last time we spoke? So it's a quick little 2, 3, 4, 5 minute conversation. So we have our lead managers doing about anywhere from 50 to 100 calls a day and setting up appointments for our acquisitions managers. So it's like an assembly line. That's sort of how I look at my business right now.
Yeah, and that's a popular type role or kind of adjustment to the lead manager role, like a lead follow-up specialist, like Nick, who I told you I was hanging out with yesterday, has. That's pretty much taking everything. They're handling all leads on the intake when it originally comes in or when they originally make the connection cold calling. But then in the database, whatever you're using for your CRM database, they're touching all the cold and all the old leads, and essentially is trying to kick up dirt for anybody on the acquisition side.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised like how many sellers, like even from 2 or 3 years ago, that I'm still following up with. And in InvestorFuse, you'll see this huge old communication log with like 60 contacts. And then, so like 2 years down the road, you get the property under contract. It's just long-term follow-up. And so the total time spent on that seller probably is like an hour, with just little 2 to 5 minute touches spread over 2 years. So it's super important to follow up. A lot of people think they could just get a deal like that when they send out their marketing, and that happens. But, really your money's going to be made when you follow up with these sellers.
And to your KPI, like a massive KPI guy, which I love and respect. That's why it's important to have some type of rhythm that you're analyzing the KPIs, because a lot of there could be chunks where they come down the line, like Cece's been saying. Let's talk a little bit. So you have a lead man. You're big on the lead manager, or people having an emphasis on hiring that lead manager first. Take all the intake and do all the follow up, and make sure there's enough leads to follow up with to pass it on to acquisitions. For your business, you have Ethan boots on the ground. For your clients, are all of them either the boots on the ground, or are they doing anything virtual? And kind of what's your best advice towards then moving down the assembly line, as you phrase it, for hiring acquisitions once your lead manager is in place, or lead managers?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say 70% of them are actually in the market that they're wholesaling in. If they can be in the market, that'll be great, because we could do a live connect. Say we have a hot lead with the lead manager, and we could just rope them in, the acquisitions manager or the client in that market, and they could coordinate an appointment right then and there. So it's a little bit difficult doing that if you're virtual, right? You can't just pick up, and if you're 3 or 4 hours away from your virtual market, you can't just pick up and go and get a contract or go set up the appointment. So I found the best results are if they're actually in that market. If you are virtual wholesaling, you have to be really good at negotiating and acquisitions and communication with the sellers. But if somebody's looking, what was your next question about the lead managers to acquisition managers?
I kind of, I guess, general broad stroke on either hiring them, maintaining them, and maybe like that threshold point of when you hire your acquisitions manager, or maybe even bring an additional one, maybe hitting on both those.
Yeah, no, good question. So I would say to bring on an AM acquisitions manager once you probably, I mean, really once you feel too overwhelmed with managing the leads and then actually setting up the appointments and going on the appointments yourself. You'll know, I would tell people around 200 to 300 leads in your CRM that you're actively following up with, because, over the course of a month, 10% of those are going to turn from warm to hot probably. So, you're talking about if you're generating 300 leads a month, plus you're following up with 300 old leads, it might get a little bit busy for you to do all of that yourself. So you definitely want to do that once you have consistent deal flow, because I always tell people, especially the way the economy is now, things are tough on people. You want to be able to pay them base salary, nothing crazy, but base salary initially for a month or two, at least while they get their feet wet in your business. And then you could switch them to commission. So you want to be doing consistent, deal flow. You want to understand your whole business process, right? You don't want things to be unorganized because, if you're unorganized and looking all flustered every day, that's not going to instill very much confidence in your acquisitions manager that you're going to be able to take care of them. So, so really those are my biggest tips when hiring an acquisitions manager. That really shouldn't be your first hire. Should be probably your second, I would say your third hire. I would hire a lead manager first, a project manager, like a, jack of all trades VA, to do like technology stuff, admin stuff for you, and then probably an acquisitions manager at that point.
Love it. You hit something that I want to touch on just out of curiosity, doing this for a good bit now. When did you start wholesaling? 2015, 2016 range?
Yeah, 2015.
2015. How have you grown as the CEO, and how has your culture improved, and how are you intentional about managing the culture? Because you said something there that kind of hit on that. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it, trying to vocalize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Surprisingly, it's taking myself out of the business more and more, because I could get real emotional when it comes to, the ups and downs in the business. Like when I was really hands-on with the business, I remember I would be really crushed sometimes if a seller lead came in and we thought we were going to get it under contract. And then the seller was like, all of a sudden, went ghost or wasn't interested. So I would be too close to the ground. And, when I would cold call, I would like overanalyze what I was saying on the phone, or when I was trying to lock up deals, the same thing. So more of like shifting my mindset and understanding that, hey, I'm not good at everything in this business. There are people that are smarter than me at other parts of this business. This lead gen thing is something I'm really good at. Let me focus on that and then put killer people in the positions that I'm weak at to make the company stronger. So that was something I really had to come to terms with myself, because, you always think that you can do stuff better yourself, and then you end up messing it up and you're like, okay, why did I do that? So really, I would say my mindset shifted around 2018. And I've just been getting better and better at trusting the people that are on my team to do their jobs and not micromanage them, because nobody likes being micromanaged. As far as company culture, we're spread out everywhere. My partner, Ethan, he's in Houston. We have our team over in the Philippines. I have an assistant and she lives about, an hour away from me. So every week we have weekly calls, 9 a.m. on Monday, to get everybody on the same page. And we always want to make people feel like, hey, you're not just a temporary employee here. You're actually a contributor. That's why, we cut out bonuses every quarter for our team. That's why we, make sure if they need a day off, hey, it's a paid day off, right? If you're a contributor to this team, we're not like nickel and diming and stuff like that when it comes to, payment and stuff, because I want them to be taken care of and excited to do the work, because if they're excited to do the work, it takes a load off of me. I'm able to grow and scale the company.
Love that, man. Very solid answer, and hitting some good points there, taking care of them, and they'll take care of you. And Absolutely. They'll take care of your clientele, the sellers that you're trying to serve as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they take ownership of it. If it just seems like it's a revolving door,
Mhm.
and you don't treat these people with respect, you're never going to find those rock star people because number one, you're not going to attract that type of person if you have that toxic sort of environment. And number two, they're not going to stay long enough where you can see whether or not they're good enough in that seat. So you want to be kind to people, want to make sure, you set the standard, but also you're understanding and you're not trying to give them too much to do at once. If they're a lead manager, just let them manage the lead. If they're a project manager, just let them do admin stuff. Don't switch it up on them, and then also support them through training. Weekly trainings or however your training cadence is in your business.
Love it. What is the best place to reach out to you to touch base, either for, which I want to ask you about here as we're kind of putting a bow on this thing, about working with you as a consultant for marketing and lead gen, and what's the best place to reach out for you for that, and what does
Yeah.
it look like working with you and getting started with you?
Yeah, definitely. So Facebook, I'm always on Facebook, or you can email me at my business email is info@ccgarlandmarketing.com. I'm always in my emails. And if you hit me up on Facebook, ask me any questions, guys. I am more than open to just pointing people in the right direction. But if you guys are having issues with setting up your marketing, or if anybody is just stuck with scaling, it's usually the investors that have closed like 2 or 3 deals and they're just stuck with like getting up over that ramp, man. I'm your guy for that. Like, I love this stuff. I nerd out on it. If you shake your head at spreadsheets and you don't like doing that, give me a spreadsheet to look at. I'll look at it all day. So, but if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email. But if people want to actually implement this themselves, I have my Motivated Seller Marketing Academy, where basically I just go through all this step by step. So by the time they're finished with that academy, they have a cold calling system that's outsourced and running on its own.
Love it.
Yeah.
I would absolutely, if I was doing this business, I would absolutely be reaching out to CC to handle all this for me. That's hilarious. But yeah, guys, CC is absolute, man. We're keeping the interview close to 40 something minutes here, but it's funny because CC was doing some stuff with us prior, and one of our challenges was a 2-day thing, just all this stuff except screen sharing and a 2-day pretty much workshop. And I think we had scheduled it for an hour or two, and CC was able to go 3 or 4 hours each day, share screening on Redfin, I believe it was, going through like a market analysis where he was talking about the same exact thing, finding the median home price of all the zip codes in a specific county, kind of doing the process of elimination and getting rid of the higher end, more affluent stuff, going into transactions. And it was awesome seeing him kind of weed out and dissect almost like a surgeon, just going through and cutting, seeing where the highest percent of success would be in doing marketing for wholesale type deals. So he is a wealth of knowledge. I know I was, as the host, I was jumping around a little bit, but that's just because there's so much stuff to extract from CC. I was trying to give you guys like a bite of all the different areas that we could extract from. So yeah. CC, man, appreciate you. Always a lot of fun. Definitely got to touch base more often here, and hopefully get to see you soon and hang out with you when you're not in the Dominican Republic or traveling around doing stuff.
Definitely. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Carlos, for having me on. Thank you.
My pleasure, man. Always. You're a beast and an awesome guy. Appreciate how you rock and roll in business and life, man. Really, really an inspiration for me.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Carlos.
Yeah, man.